and is one of the main architects of the plan for reconciliation and cooperation between the two Koreas, known as the Sunshine Policy. He is the only international political scientist to have attended all of the inter-Korean summits organized by multiple South Korean administrations. He was also Special Advisor on National Security and Foreign Affairs for the incumbent Moon Jae-in administration for the settlement of permanent peace on the peninsula. I only just found out a moment ago he is also the founder and editor of Global Asia. So a second special welcome to a fellow journalist. Mr. Moon is going to hopefully provide us with some clear answers to questions surrounding the Korean Peninsula, including the roles of the United States and China in East Asia. I'm going to invite Mr. Moon to come and speak to you now, and time permitting afterwards we'll hold a question and answer session, but I do understand that Mr. Moon has a further appointment, a diplomatic meeting. So without further ado, please, Mr. Moon, please come and take a seat in comfort. Speak to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. Is microphone working? Okay. I have so many heads, but I know one thing for clear, that is, journalists do not like a long lecture. Therefore, I will give a very short talk, about 20 minutes. Okay. In fact, I gave two topics to Steve. The one topic was Korean Peninsula peace, and second topic was U.S.-China strategic rivalry and South Korean choice. He chose the second topic. Therefore, I will give a talk on the U.S.-China strategic rivalry and South Korean choice. Maybe EU is facing very similar dilemma. Really, there is very strange coincidence of COVID-19 and the intensifying U.S.-China strategic rivalry. Okay. You may recall Secretary Mike Pompeo's speech at the Nixon Museum on July 21st last year. He argued that the spread of COVID-19 was caused by Chinese Communist Party. Okay. Chinese Communist Party was trying to conceal what happened in Wuhan by arresting, Dr. Li Wenliang, and such a kind of, CCP's effort failed to prevent spread of COVID-19 all over the world. Therefore, all problem came from CCP. Then he argued down with the CCP, and then he even called President Xi Jinping as, the chief secretary of Communist Party. Okay, and that was in the beginning of, that is why we used to call it, because the Trump administration was attacking ideological and organizational foundation of CCP. That is why I began to call it now there is a chance for the advent of the new Cold War between China and the United States. But if you look back, China-U.S. relations, there is very interesting spectrum of the relations. Particularly since 1979, there was a stage of engagement, then it evolved into a stage of cooperation, and then during the days of President Obama, competition was emphasized. And during the days of President Trump, they gave a much more focus on rivalry and animosity. If you look at the spectrum from engagement, cooperation, competition, rivalry, and animosity, now I would say that engagement and cooperation are evaporating. Competition is at the center, but there is a growing propensity toward rivalry and animosity. In what areas? I see four major areas. First area is geopolitics. As you all know that China has been pursuing a Belt and Road strategy. And the U.S. sees the Belt and Road strategy is a culmination of Chinese geopolitical strategy that combines Mackindon's continentalist strategy, Mahan's maritime strategy, and Speinman's rimland strategy. It's it's ground Silk Road, ocean Silk Road, Arctic Silk Road, digital Silk Road. The Silk Road is everywhere. Therefore, China is expanding into the globe. The United States wanted to cut it off. Within that kind of equation, the American response to China's move has been intensified. And it is particularly so because, as you all know, China used to pursue so-called peaceful development strategy, by focusing on domestic issues such as sustainable development, reducing structural inequality in China, eradicating corruption, preserving environmental integrity, and resolving consumption and resources issues, and etc. In order to achieve this internal objective, China should maintain peace with outside countries, at the same time pursuing social harmony at home. That is the essence of peaceful development. But nowadays you can clearly see the transition into not only peaceful rise, but big power rise. And United States see in this way. An American interpretation is very interesting. President Xi Jinping says that we wanted to achieve the dream of strong army by year 2035, and China dream, Jong by 2049, the second centennial. The first centennial is this year. That is the 100th year of founding of Chinese Communist Party. And President Xi Jinping declared, Hui, the comfortable society is achieved. Second centennial is 2049. That's the 100th anniversary of founding of People's Chinese Republic, People's Republic of China. And then the period that China wants to achieve, China dream. But American interpretation is very interesting. By 2035, China wanted to have a regional hegemony in Asia Pacific. By 2049, China wanted to have a global hegemony. Therefore, United States should prevent China from rising as a regional hegemon and global hegemon. But in that process, you can see several fresh points. Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, East China Sea, and the Korean Peninsula. And we are very much concerned, and as you all can see, during the days of Obama administration, United States pursued so-called Asia rebalancing, or people to Asia strategy. That was succeeded by President Trump's Indo-Pacific strategy and Quad. And most recently, President Biden initiated AUKUS. And there is the strategy clearly aims at encircling and containing China. Those are the major issue areas. And second area is the geoeconomy. Geoeconomy has three major issue areas. One is trade, unfair trade practiced by China. Stealing of American intellectual property rights, forced transfer of technology, by the of American investors in China or foreign investors in China by the Chinese government. Those are trade issues. Another issue is currency. The United States is very much concerned about Chinese effort to challenge American currency hegemony. Of course, China tried internationalization of Chinese yuan, but that failed. But China is moving into the direction of digital currency, which U.S. cannot control. If China is not using SWIFT code, how can the United States use all kinds of sanction measures? Secondary boycott based on financial instruments was the most important tool of American foreign policy. Obviously, China wanted to move away from that kind of American currency hegemony, and that is why the People's Bank is pushing for the digital currency. Third is a Belt and Road strategy. Third major areas is, I would say, is crash of techno-nationalism. Techno-nationalism means what? The state organization and subsidization of technology development. Okay, a state-led, enhancement of technological competitiveness. But again, there are, I think, the four contentious areas. First area is technology and competitiveness. President Biden has been putting a lot of emphasis on that dimension. Second area is national security implication of technology. Huawei's 5G technology is a perfect example. Okay. And also, advanced science and technology is vital to the development of armament. Okay. Third dimension of technology is what I call the crash of technology standard. China has introduced China Standard 2035. That means what? By 2035, China wants to have at least 70% of cutting-edge technologies by Chinese technology standard, GPS, 5G, and all others. Americans are very much concerned about that kind of move. Okay. The United States has enjoyed technology hegemony by setting global technology standard, but China is challenging. Finally, the issue of human rights and democracy issues. China has been importing and developing technology that can be used for the control of civil society. Okay, face recognition, eye recognition, okay, CCTV. They are very useful in controlling civilian moves. Okay, the United States doesn't want that kind of technology to flow in China. That's why Secretary Tony Blinken proposed idea of T10, technology 10. Okay. Therefore, the area of competition in technology is quite fierce. Final domain is value domain. The Biden administration doesn't talk about ideology anymore. Okay. The Biden administration does not really criticize the Chinese Communist Party as the Trump administration did. However, Biden administration has been really promoting the ideas of human rights and democracy in China. Likewise, you can see four areas: geopolitical area, geoeconomic area, technology area, and value area. Then, what the Biden administration will be pursuing, what kind of policy it will be pursuing on China? I see three major categories. First category is the category of cooperation. President Biden made it very clear. We wanted to pursue cooperation with China in the areas of climate change, the pandemic, nuclear proliferation, Iranian nuclear issue, North Korean nuclear issue. We will cooperate with China. However, second category is the area of competition, what he called extreme competition. He said that in the areas of trade and technology, we'll engage in extreme competition with China. Third area is the area of confrontation, geopolitics and value. We'll never make a concession. We'll confront China. Therefore, hold these three rather ambivalent ideas of cooperation, competition, and confrontation cohabitate in the Biden foreign policy in China. Then what kinds of policy choice should South Korea make? We are in deep dilemma. Okay. It varies. In geopolitics, we are kind of sandwiched. Geoeconomics, we are sandwiched. Technology, we are sandwiched. And value issue, we are sandwiched. But within South Korea, there are ongoing domestic debates on what kind of strategy we should pursue. Conservatives in South Korea, and particularly in older generation, argue that we should pursue pro-American balancing strategy. Okay, the U.S. is a hegemon, China is a challenger. It is always safe for countries like South Korea to bet on the hegemon, existing hegemon, so that we can balance or deter Chinese rise. Therefore, there is one school of thought. Another school of thought is bandwagoning school. And a lot of historians argue that, no, that perspective. If you look at the Korean history, we have a bitter past experience in 17th centuries. At a time, Qing dynasty was rising, Ming dynasty was declining, but the Joseon dynasty battled on the declining Ming dynasty. We were invaded by the Qing dynasty, and our king had really insulting, humiliation, okay, by the invading Qing dynasty. Therefore, those historians argued that learn from the past. Okay, now Chinese rise is real. China is a big country, very near to the Korean Peninsula. American power is declining and far away from the Korean Peninsula. Then there's every reason for us to be close and friendly with China. Therefore, it is better to bandwagon China rather than balancing against China with the United States. That is the second school of thought. Third school of thought is the standing alone perspective. We suffered enough for the past 2,000 years by big powers. Okay, we should stand alone. Then again, two variants in this standing alone school. One school is this: we should have nuclear weapons, and the middle power is nuclear weapons. There are even big powers like China, the U.S., Japan cannot, tremble, that kind of Korea. Okay? Particularly if Korea is unified, and therefore very hardline position, very nationalist position. But some progressive argue that perhaps the only solution we can get away from the dilemma of choice between China and the United States is to declare permanent neutrality, okay, so that we can transcend or get away from the bloc diplomacy. But this standalone approach is very minority view. Fourth school of thought is what I call the status quo school. I would say majority of South Koreans support the status quo school. The school is very simple. We continue to maintain alliance with the United States while maintaining strategic cooperative partnership with China. Okay? And they argue that why should there be choice between the two? Okay? Therefore, we should push to the last point until China and the United States really literally engage in overt confrontation. But in this status quo strategy, there is some kind of, very sure strategic calculus. The calculus is this, but the whole point is that if South Korea joined the United States for Indo-Pacific strategy, Quad, AUKUS, and whatever, then China will treat South Korea as an enemy. If that happens, then China will be supporting North Korea. China withdrew from North Korea in 1957. To my understanding, China has never provided North Korea with military weapons, no logistic support. But if China began to resume supply of weapons and logistic support to North Korea, then we'll be facing dual challenges from North Korea. Okay, not only just asymmetric threats such as nuclear weapons, but also conventional threat. Therefore, that poses a really existential threat to us. That is why our government has been very, very cautious in taking side. Okay. But still, as I pointed out, at one point we will be forced to take choice. Once we make choice, then either one of them, either China or the United States, will be treating us as an enemy. Then that will create major security dilemma for us. That is why I personally have been proposing the idea of transcending diplomacy. Transcending diplomacy is what? We should get away from this trapping structure imposed by the big power rivalry between China and the United States. How can we do that? We should approach other middle powers who faces very similar situation like us. If we should enhance our cooperation with Japan, France, Germany, Australia, Canada, and etc. And they have commonalities. They're all the American allies. At the same time, they all heavily dependent on China for economy. But we have also networks and channels of communication. And we can criticize China collectively. That will carry different weight. At the same time, American policy is not always right. Then we can say no to the Americans too. And we can urge Americans and China to work together. Okay? You may recall that Henry Kissinger was saying that if China and the United States go to collision course, then we cannot rule out the possibility of 1914 resurrecting. Okay. For example, crash of technology. Why middle powers propose a technology round? We can create a set of norms, principles, rules, and procedures to regulate the negative outcomes of techno-nationalism. Trading issue. Why don't we intensify to strengthen WTO system? For middle power countries, the multilateralism is the best way of solving the international problems. But that has been my suggestion. But my suggestion has not been very popular because they criticize me that does South Korea has that kind of imagination and capability? Does South Korea have that kind of diplomatic skills? My answer is very simple. Why not? If we encourage our foreign minister guys to come up with wild imagination, if we lend the political support in our foreign service officers, to engage in that kind of, diplomatic entrepreneurship, I think it's more than possible. But I gave a talks at Free University of Berlin and Stiftung, Wissenschaft politician in Berlin on Monday. I realized there's quite a sympathy, even empathy with my idea. Apparently, Germans are somewhat, getting sick and tired of all this sandwich between the U.S. and China. And I will continue to, the raising voice in that direction. But anyhow, it's a very difficult situation. But one thing is very clear. We should prevent China and the United States from getting into collision course. That is a matter of global existential, that is a matter of global, it's a global catastrophe, And also, if war takes place between China and the United States, the war will take place around in our part of the world, Northeast Asia, Korean Peninsula, South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, even Japanese islands. We wanted to avoid that kind of things. But now, we don't have that kinds of voices coming out. The only exception is Kevin Rudd of Australia. Kevin Rudd has been writing and giving speeches saying that we should form M7, multilateral middle power 7 or M11. Okay, and I think that his proposal makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, and I hope that you can share with, not mine, but with Kevin Rudd's idea of the M7 or M11. I will stop here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, certainly a lot of food for thought there. Transcending diplomacy. I shall remember that one. Well, I'd like to throw it open to the floor, please, and invite questions to Mr. Moon. If you could put your hand up and...
And also, you can ask whatever questions. Apart from the China-U.S. rivalry, you can ask questions on the Korean Peninsula, next presidency election in South Korea, whatever questions.
I'm going to ask you one question first, if I may. What's your take on the what's going on in the South China Sea and Taiwan at the moment? Do you see?
It's quite dangerous, okay, but I hope that both China and Taiwan avoid now they're engaging in a game of chicken, but it has something to do with domestic politics, okay. President Taiwan, wanted to consolidate her support, okay, against Kuomintang, KMT, okay. President Xi Jinping same. Next year, he'll be going through whether he will renew third term or not, okay. Therefore, I think it's not simply the American political, the strategic equation. I personally believe it's domestic politics that are really driving both Taiwan and China to the confronted position. But in the past, during the days of Obama administration, the United States played a very important mediating role by pursuing the policy of strategic ambiguity. Okay, but I'm very worrisome. But again, the Biden administration has shown the very policy of restraint. Okay, and the Washington made it clear that we'll go for we still honor one China policy. Okay, we resort to the strategic ambiguity. But hardliners in Washington are pushing for the strategic clarity that will defend Taiwan, even at the expense of a major military conflict. Okay.
And one follow-up question, if I may, before I throw it open. In everything you've said, what's the message? What to the EU? What can the EU learn from what you're saying?
Very clear, because EU is a group of countries, right? The EU has the greatest voice, and EU should be able to say no to China and no to the United States. You can summon them. What they are doing is not right way of doing things. Not only for the for EU countries, but also for the global common goods. Therefore, I think EU has all the major powers, right? You have Germany, France, okay, all the important countries. They should raise a voice. But again, there is a kind of cleavage structure. A great chunk of EU members are NATO members, okay, and that is why you may have a difficulty in coming with a collective voice. But still, if certain things are not the right things for the interest of EU and the global society, then you should, speak out.
Okay. Could I have a first question, please? Gentleman there, could you just identify yourself and where you're from?
You're saying this should be a kind of a middle ground, but you're also saying that a lot of this posturing by China and by the US or by any of the opponents in the confrontation is based on domestic politics. Don't you end up in a situation where the approach of any of the two opponents will be, if you're not with us, you're against us?
Yeah, they have been pushing us. Okay, for example, we have been getting a lot of pressure from the United States, and also we have been getting a lot of pressure from China. But our government so far has been saying that, you know, for example, Indo-Pacific strategy, okay? The United States want us to join it so that we can send our troops to the military exercise in South China Sea, if not the Taiwan Strait. But we have been abstaining from sending, you know, troops that one, you know, because that can complicate our security situation. And particularly we have, you know, imminent and present threat coming from North Korea. Okay, we just persuade the Americans. Okay, and also then China has been telling us that you know, you always goes with the United States, and we tell Chinese that we are not doing that one. Okay, and also our government position is, you know, American position is open, free Indo-Pacific, and our government has been saying that it should be open, free, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. That means what? China, North Korea, those countries should not be excluded. Because if they are excluded, then they will create their own bloc. Then there will be revival of old Cold War in our part of the world. And that will be, you know, kind of worst you know, nightmare for us. Our government has been much more cautious. But again, if you look at domestic politics, okay, maybe, I don't know, but if conservative win next presidential election, maybe they may go along with the United States by joining, you know, Quad and etc. But progress regime will take a different position. But even conservative, even if they win the next presidential election, it will be much more cautious in making that kind of decision. But again, even in South Korea, driving force is not the strategic equation, but the domestic politics.
Yes, please.
No, because it's a live streaming.
The follow-up question is that, considering what you just answered, I was thinking about, you said that in South Korea there are two main philosophies on it. Now, if I elaborate on it, I get the impression that only one of the two remains an option, and that is reunification and the nuclear option as a nation to stay out of a confrontation between two bigger blocs. So doesn't that undermine other options for South Korea for not choosing sides and, for instance, not entering in the Pacific Free Trade Organization or not recognizing Taiwan and so on? So choosing for the middle ground is practically being forced into a reunification and a nuclear option with North Korea.
We are hoping that North Korea understands that logic, but North Korea is not responding to that logic. You're absolutely right. If we are if we are trapped in this you know, middle ground dilemma, then logical choice is to have inter-Korean unification. Okay, then we don't have to rely on alliance, right? Then we don't have to worry about China either. But again, then the leaders of North and South Korea should have a common understanding, but that is not. Because North Korean leadership already thinks that South Korea will never give up alliance with the United States. That mistrust and distrust have become the major force behind that logic. You know.
Yes, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I'm a trainee at the European Election Service. It was interesting you talked about South Korea not taking a side, but at the same time, when you talk about engaging other parties, like-minded parties, you only mention certain member states. Don't you think, if you want this strategy to carry a bigger weight, that you should take this engagement on the European level and not only engage some member states? I think you called France and Germany. Specifically because the Europeans are also taking this more fragmented approach towards China. So I was wondering, don't you think this is more effective?
That's very in the difficult part, you know. We treat the EU as a unitary actor, but if you come into Brussels, then you discover that it's not a unitary actor. in the very fragile compromise among the competing actors in Europe, But still, I would suggest our government to have a more deeper, talks with the EU as a whole, okay? And particularly, EU ambassador in Seoul, Maria, she's very, very active. In fact, my institute will be initiating a joint project with the EU on the future of allocate EU cooperation in Indo-Pacific strategy. Therefore, I think in fact, tomorrow I will be having a roundtable talk with Madame Mogherini, and we'll be pushing for that idea. Therefore, instead of you're absolutely right. Okay, our government can have bilateral talks with Paris and Berlin and etc. But the most important thing is the EU as a whole. Okay, and the collective voice coming from EU will carry more weight than individual voice of Berlin or Paris. Okay, therefore, in this sense, I agree with you. Therefore, South Korea and EU should engage in much deeper and practical discussions on the future of U.S.-China strategic liability and how they should come up with, joint stance on that issue.
The one phrase I haven't heard at all yet is the United Nations. Is there no longer a role for the UN in any of this?
That's a good question. I personally believe in the Pax Universalitatis. You may recall that, United States won the first Gulf War, and I remember that was September 25th, 1991. President Bush, 41, went to United Nations. He gave a very moving speech, and he declared the age of Pax Americana is over. Now we should start the new age of Pax Universalitatis, new world order based on the United Nations. I personally wanted that kind of multilateral approach, but again, given the current status of United Nations, I don't know to what extent the United States can take leadership or not. But therefore, ideally speaking, I personally support the United Nations-based international order, a more active role by United Nations. If that is not possible, then those middle powers or EU and those countries can cooperate together. But again, for Korea is a relatively small country, okay, and for small and middle-sized countries, multilateralism is the best way. Okay, for the strong, unilateralism or bilateralism would work, but for relatively small, multilateralism is the best way of promoting their interest and global interest.
Next question, please.
I'm Lisa. I work for an NGO called Trias. Or anyway, I've been wondering, because the United States has shown its presence in, for instance, the South China Sea, but also the UK has also sent a guardianship there, France, and as well Germany has shown to be in favor of that stance at least. Does that in any way influence how South Korea feels about collaborating with France or Germany or similar countries in that matter?
That's a very good question too, because opinion in South Korea is divided. For conservatives, that's a welcome addition, the extension of NATO. Okay, American alliance will be strengthened. That will be good for the Korean security. But for progressives, that's a bad omen. That reminds us of 19th century gunboat diplomacy. Korea opened its port after American ship, French ship, the British ship came to the Korean Peninsula and engaged in gunboat diplomacy. Therefore, the progressive, resurrect the old memories of European gunboat and American gunboat diplomacy. Therefore, but in case of China, they will have a more bitter memory of Opium War, two British, naval vessels destroying almost 28, Qing dynasty, old, vessels. Therefore, but that kinds of demonstration of European power in our part of the world is not necessarily good. That would really aggravate, deteriorate overall strategic situation in our part of the world. Okay, and therefore a lot of people argue that the European powers stay in Europe. Why the hell come all the way to East Asia? Great Britain has a reason, because South Korea is trying to, develop the light, aircraft carrier, and Great Britain has a wonderful light aircraft carrier. They want to show it to us. But the German frigate coming to that part of the world, I don't understand. What can we do? What, German frigate did not have any kind of power base there. It has a problem of all the logistic support and etc. But I don't understand why the hell. I asked that question in Berlin, but they didn't have any good answer to that question.
Thank you.
Yes, at the back there, lady, young lady.
Yes. Thank you for. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for a very excellent presentation, and you gave a very clear picture about the U.S.-China rivalry. My name is Jin Jutha. I'm from the Thai Embassy. I have two questions. So the first question is about MICTA. So I have heard about this grouping between Mexico, I think, MICTA, right? So Mexico, Indonesia, Korea,
Australia,
Turkey, and South Africa, and Australia.
Australia
as well?
not included.
Yes.
Australia.
So this seems to be like a grouping of powers. Korea's efforts to form a grouping of middle powers to be more independent from big powers, and what is the status of MICTA now? You think that it could be expanded to include other countries? So this is my first question. And the second question is about Southeast Asia. So I'm from Thailand, and we are also a stage of rivalry between the US and China. And what do you think about maybe ASEAN's position vis-a-vis the US-China rivalry at the moment? And what do you think could happen to us in the future with the development of US-China rivalry? Thank you.
The MICTA, it was initiated by the Lee Myung-bak government of South Korea, and in cooperation with Mati, Megalawat, of Indonesian foreign minister, and Australian foreign minister, but that has not been working very well. Okay, and because they are supposed to raise middle power voices at the United Nations, primarily at the United Nations and G20 and whatever. Some members are not members of G22. Therefore, it didn't work it out very well. But again, there are middle powers, but they are all equal. But some middle power more equal than others. Okay. Therefore, in order to influence China and the United States, you got to form a cultivate cooperation is more unequal middle powers rather than ordinary middle power. That is my answer to your first question. And second question, ASEAN issue. But ASEAN has a less salient security issue, therefore less problematic than South Korea. But eventually, ASEAN will be cornered to take position. But as you know, Singapore has been setting the agenda within ASEAN. Singapore position is very similar to South Korean position. Okay, and Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong has been arguing that no confrontation between China and the United States. That will be the disaster for ASEAN countries, in particular, and Asia Pacific in general. And I agree with his observation. Therefore, South Korea, Japan, ASEAN countries should work together to prevent, emergence of new bloc politics in the Asia Pacific or in East Asia.
Thank you.
Filling formerly civil service in Parliament. I have a question, maybe a bit provocative. Do you see a role for new powers in parentheses, like global Britain or global Australia?
What do you mean by global Britain and global Australia?
It's what they consider there could be.
In fact, I wrote a column on the foreshadows of AUKUS, and then in that column I argued that as a result of formation of AUKUS, okay, there is a new hierarchy within American alliance system. Okay, the members of AUKUS, U.S., Australia, and United Great Britain, they are supreme class, okay, and members of Five Eyes, that include New Zealand and Canada, they are the first-class members of American alliance. And then there are so-called ordinary class members of American alliance. That is all the rest of, the rest will belong to that category. Therefore, the creation of AUKUS has, caused a very, precarious sense of hierarchy in the American alliance system. Again, going back to 1942, when the Five Eyes was formed. There is an Anglo-Saxonian, coalition, okay? And in fact, Japan and Germany really wanted, West Germany wanted to join Five Eyes, but they were rejected, okay? Therefore, but this time the creation of AUKUS has fostered that kind of perception among non-Anglo-Saxon and members of American alliance system. I think the Biden administration should really heal that fractured pain on the part of so-called non-Anglo-Saxonian allies.
Just add another question. I just mentioned two countries who want to do something. But to attract in this field, not only America, China, but also others interested. For example, India is also heading for nuclear and global power. The more people are interested, the more it can be built a kind of cooperation.
Yeah, I agree with you. But for example, G20 is a really wonderful formula. But again, G20 is becoming fragmented. Okay, look at in the APEC. APEC's goal to create the free trade area in Asia Pacific is gone. But still, APEC continues. Why? There's annual meeting of leaders. The summit talks, they can have a bilateral, trilateral summit talks. And they mostly talk about the security issues. Therefore, G20 would be a wonderful formula. But I don't understand why the United States is trying to create new venues, new forms like T10, Technology 10, D10, Democracy 10, all exclusive blocks. I think that is not very desirable.
Jong here, please. The microphone, the camera.
Hello, my name is Andy Vermoot. I'm from the International Alliance for the Defense of Rights and Freedoms. We are an organization consulted also by the United Nations. And I wanted to ask some questions regarding you talked about United Nations, maybe a role for the United Nations. But if you say that you're sandwiched between the United States and China, the Security Council, it's not possible to that United Nations could play a role. We need a reform of the United Nations with maybe United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. I want to ask your position on that, if you believe in a sort of political power of the United Nations in the future. And the other question, you were busy regarding the unification of Korea. Do you think in your life you will see this? And the difficult thing that you said, that it's not easy to be sandwiched between China and United States. Is that not a self-fulfilling prophecy if giving South Korea that role? If you say that, you project it.
As to your first question, unless there is a reform at the Security Council system of United Nations cannot be effective. Okay? Either expand the membership of Security Council or get rid of Security Council, come up with a new formula. Otherwise, really, I don't see any hope coming out of the United Nations system. Therefore, the reform of the UN system is essential to the preservation of global peace. Okay? United Nations as a whole has been, captive of the Security Council, which is extremely polarized. Okay? As to your second question, when you talk about Korean reunification, it's all depends on how you define unification. Unification can be defined as one single unified nation state. It can be federation. I mean, federation means what? One nation, one state, okay, and two systems and two local governments. Or it could be, confederation, like Switzerland and old Czechoslovakia, okay. Or it could be union of North-South Korean state, like the European Union. South Korea wants union of North-South Korean states. North Korea wants confederation. North Korea still wants one nation, one state, okay? But South Korea believes that one state is totally impossible because the North-South Korean system is too heterogeneous. Therefore, let us learn from the European Union. Let us form one nation, two states, two systems, two governments. But let us promote exchange and cooperation. Let us promote peaceful coexistence. And let us create the de facto situation of de facto unification so that people, goods, and services can move freely. And then there can be, institutionalized peaceful coexistence, like in Europe. Then our posterities, our descendants will decide on the nature of unification. Okay? Therefore, our goal is very simple. Let us get rid of war. Okay? Let us pursue peaceful coexistence. Okay? We will not try to undermine your regime. You don't do that against us. That is our goal. Therefore, if our goal is the union of North-South Korean states, and if North Korea cooperate, if big powers do not obstruct our process of reunification, I think we can be done within 10 years. Okay? It's not that difficult. But if we're talking about the one single unified nation state or federation, not in my lifetime.
Can I ask one question? Mm-hmm. Which country worries you the most? North Korea, China, or the USA?
What do you mean by that?
Well, as you see as the biggest threat to peace in this world.
Yesterday, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made a very good statement. Our main enemy is neither United States nor South Korea. The war itself. He gave a perfect example. We don't see, we don't treat North Korea as an enemy, China enemy, or the United States enemy. I think it's very, anachronistic, way of doing the things. Therefore, we don't want war. In order to get rid of war, we are ready to cooperate. Anyhow, then I'm being too abstract, but to answer your question, America is our ally. China is our good friend. North Korea is our brethren. If we have an open mind, there is no worry about somebody being our enemies and our threat. Okay.
I added the USA as tongue-in-cheek there.
In your very clear explanation of what are the four biggest parts of the propensity of rivalry in the region, you mentioned tech-nationalism, and there is also a big economic part that's already being played by a number of states. We see chip shortages in the Taiwan Strait. We see the same problem already happening on a very small but already significant scale in South Korea. You see the European car industry grinding to a halt because of shortages in microprocessors. This tech nationalism and this entire rivalry problem in the Taiwan Strait or in the South China Sea or in the region could be a noose around the neck of the South Korean economy, a noose around the neck of the Taiwan economy, a noose around the neck of the European and even the American economy. So what's your approach on this problem? Because in the end, it's always about the money. So if entire industries are being slaughtered because of a Chinese posturing and a propensity for rivalry, which we call then in this case, as you mentioned, tech nationalism, then we are already in trouble. So what's your view on it, and what's the way out, or what would be the worst case scenario if it continues?
I mean, techno-nationalism has been backfiring on China. It has been backfiring on the United States too. Therefore, if you pursue very parochial, if you pursue a parochial, national interest in terms of technology, it will fire back. It will create a negative boomerang effect on them. That is why I'm not saying that we should go back to the techno-globalism, but we should build some kind of international regime to regulate, so-called negative behavior in the area of technology transactions. And as going back to your, semiconductor chip, shortage case, that was a problem of forecasting, not because, China, okay? Because of COVID-19, everybody thought that there is a sharp decline the demand on the chips, and then major plants were cutting down their productions. Yet, COVID-19 was overcome, and there was a sharp demand of chips, particularly automobile sector, and the factories could not supply. Okay, therefore, even China itself is a victim in the first phase of COVID-19, and all those chip factories in China didn't work it out. Okay, and then we suffered. But later now, China is suffering. Therefore, my answer is very simple. If you look, when you talk about free trade, that is a pinnacle of human evolution. Okay, I believe in that way. We have tried all kinds of things, and finally we come to the conclusion: free trading system is the best. It's an evolutionary outcome. Okay, but if you begin to put all kinds of artificial restrictions on free trading system, it will backfire. It will end up with a negative sum game. Everybody will lose. Nobody will win.
Thank you. I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. Sir.
Hello. My name is Sejong. I am independent press correspondent. I have the Belgian nationality, and my father was fighting in your country in '53, if I remember. Now, just in the view of my German colleague here, who was just talking about technology, I think the biggest battle will be which country will make in the future the best electrical car. It will be Korea, China, or United States. This is, the time of battle with bombs. This is finished. We are going now to have a battle with economical ideas and with products of the future. And we have beautiful cars in Korea, especially electrical cars. And I think that you are on the good way. And the real battle will be on the economical field, not with army and weapons. This is over. This is finished. The weapons today are too strong to battle on a battlefield like we did before, or in the First World War, the Second World War, or with my father in Korea in '53.
I agree with you. Yeah, 100%.
Gentleman there, please. Next.
Glenn Ford.
Glenn Ford, Track to Asia. Will there be an end of war declaration before March the 9th?
Pardon?
Will there be an end of war declaration before March the 9th?
It's very difficult to tell, but our government is working very hard. Okay? And North Korea has shown positive response to our proposal on the end of the war declaration. China has been supporting idea. It's up to the United States. Our national security advisor is now currently visiting Washington, D.C. Let us wait and see. We are hoping it, but it is not easy. And also in South Korea, there are a lot of opposition, conservative opposition to the adoption of end-war declaration. But we are still working on it, and why don't you wait and see?
Thank you. Gentleman at the back there. Oh, gentleman behind you first, and then Mario.
Lady over there.
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Moon again. Sorry I was late. I'm Michiel Hoogveen. I'm an MEP. I'm sorry I was late, but we had a pleasant meeting this afternoon, one-on-one. And I wanted to ask a question on your vision on reunification of the Korean Peninsula, and where you stated that North Korea is looking for a federal system or confederal system. And now many scholars have told me that reunification or even rapprochement policies towards North Korea is unfeasible because North Korea actually strives towards a final victory in terms of reunification, which is translated into, according to these scholars, as reunification under the banner of the Kim family. So they say, well, it's not feasible to do any rapprochement policies towards North Korea because this is what their end goal is, and they will always strive for this as long as the Kim family is there. So what's your take on this?
And, Michael, he was an independent journalist, 6 years ago, and he came all the way to Seoul to interview me, but this time he became a member of the European Parliament. And I was impressed. He didn't put the tie at the time, but now he has a wonderful tie. And he wrote a book on the North Korea too. Anyhow, that's a very good question, but I do not agree with you, okay? Because North Korea changed the preamble of the bylaw of Korea Workers' Party last year, 8th Party Congress, and they deleted portion on the socialism in the entire Korean Peninsula. In fact, I remember when we had the first Korean summit in year 2000, President Kim Dae-jung met Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-il's first word was this. At the time, some progressive students erected the South Korean flag and North Korean flag, and then conservative daily newspapers in South Korea criticized it, and police arrested those progress students who erected the North Korean flag. And Kim Jong-il read that the South Korean newspaper and told President Kim Dae-jung, why don't you get rid of national security law? Because of national security law, those patriotic students were arrested. And then President Kim Dae-jung argued that you read the preamble of the Korea Workers' Party, okay? That you say that it's what they call the 적화통일론, so-called the communizing South Korea through socialist revolution. You set that goal in your party, bylaws in the preamble. Unless you change it, I cannot ask our people to change the national security law. And at the time, Kim Jong-il responded saying that when we hold the seventh Party Congress, I will, amend it. But he never held the Seventh Party Congress, Sixth Party Congress, okay? But at Eighth Party Congress, Kim Jong-un changed it, deleted that part. Therefore, that means North Korea will be focusing on North Korea, not South Korea, okay? And also, at the same time, our President Moon Jae-in made it very clear when he gave a talk in the Credibility Foundation in July 2017, he said that we do not have any intention to pursue unification by absorption. We do not have the intention to undermine North Korean regime. Therefore now, there's all the debate. South Korean approach to unification by absorption, North Korean approach to so-called unification through communization of South Korea. Neither of them work. Therefore, North Korea is very much concerned in domestic issues. Therefore, you can see the changing slogan. During the days of Kim Jong-il, he was emphasizing military first politics. Now, Kim Jong-un, 인민대중 제일주의, people first politics, nothing else. And Kim Jong-il used to pursue 강성대국. There is a strong army and rich nation. Therefore, strong army comes first. But now Kim Jong-un changes. 부국강병, rich nation and strong army. Therefore, they're changing priority. Therefore, North Korea I think they're very, very much concerned about being absorbed by South Korea rather than communizing South Korea.
Thank you. And last question from Marie-Laura.
Thank you very much. Just a very, very short question, which, and I'm expecting a very short answer from you. How far do you think we are from midnight, considering all this nuclear problem issue, etc.?
I cannot give you a short answer to that question because I'm really concerned about nuclear domino syndrome in our part of the world. Okay, if we fail to denuclearize North Korea, then public opinion in South Korea will be strongly favoring the possession of nuclear weapons, even against American protest. If we acquire nuclear weapons, Japan will change the peace constitution, will go for the nuclear weapons. Then there will be a nuclear domino in Northeast Asia. Taiwan will have nuclear weapons. Therefore, we should resist that kind of impulse in that part of the world. That is why there is every reason that we should have a negotiated settlement of North Korean nuclear issue.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm sure you'd all like to show your appreciation to Mr. Moon for his... Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe there are some refreshments for us all now, courtesy of the Korean Cultural Center. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending.
By the way, congratulations with Corona. With Corona. Our government will be introducing with Corona in November.